Okay, this video is going to be getting into McDonald's and the Golden Arches. And I should note at the beginning that it was inspired by a comment I received on the last video that was pointing out something very obvious, asking the question, hey, why are we seeing so much McDonald's symbolism embedded into all of these news stories recently? What's going on there? And I don't have the precise answer to that question. I'm not inside the minds of the entities that are crafting all of this propaganda and embedding it with the symbolism. I don't know what exactly they were going for or putting it in there to do in terms of manipulating our perception in a sublime fashion. So all I can do is guess, have some ideas about it. And that's what I'm going to do here, so don't take this as if I'm telling you I know why they did this, okay? No, this is just speculation. But anyway, I'm sure most of you will remember the election cycle for the 2024 presidential election and how Donald Trump was very overtly associated with McDonald's. Now, he has always had this association, so the question we're asking here is, hey, is this something more than him just really liking the food they make? Could it possibly be symbolically chosen, as it were, for him to be a big fan of McDonald's and constantly talk about it? As you can see here on the screen, he went to the extreme of working the fry station and holding a drive-through news conference at a Pennsylvania McDonald's, which was sort of in response to Kamala Harris, who also associated herself with McDonald's during the election cycle by saying that she worked there during college to get spare money. And then in true Donald Trump fashion, he disputed that, said she made it up. And who knows if it's actually true or not? I didn't look into it. I don't really care. He's just playing his role as the heel, where he constantly is saying things that aren't true that can later be quote-unquote fact-checked and then added to the list of things that he has lied about or presented misinformation on. Because that's a whole angle to the psyop that they're doing with him, among many others. But there was this publicity stunt, and then shortly after the actual election, you had Donald Trump, Elon Musk, his son, and the Kennedy. I don't know why I refer to him as the Kennedy, but RFK Jr. here. They're all in this picture. I don't even know who this dude is. And Don Jr. is holding up the McDonald's fries with the big Golden Arch logo. And then shortly thereafter, just recently, we have Luigi Mangione. Not sure how you even pronounce his last name. As you can tell, I really prepared for this video. My apologies in advance. But it's kind of hard to know the pronunciation when you don't actually watch the news and you're just reading about it. But anyway, then you have this character Luigi posing with a McDonald's Happy Meal that just so happens to have all of the new Lion King film symbolism on it that is coming out later this month at the end of December. Which will add to the symbolism here that we'll get to later. So keep that in the back of your mind that this has the Lion King all over it in addition to the two Golden Arches. And then obviously he was found via an anonymous tip, allegedly, at a McDonald's when he walked in and he was eating their food and he was caught. So two associations between Luigi and McDonald's in that story that they are presenting to us. And I will be referring to it as a story because it doesn't make a lot of sense when you actually look into it. But I'm not going to enter any verdict on what I think it may or may not be because there's just too many moving parts and it's too early to do that. But the story we're being presented has many, many, many holes in it, as is usually the case. And that is all by design. You have to understand that the conspiracy theories are built into these events in advance. And then the agents and shills on the internet run with the prefabricated conspiracy theories, and they promote them, and they are most likely misinformation of some kind, that is easily debunked, and then the mainstream press already knows in advance that they will be pointing at this debunked information, this bad information, these prefabricated bad conspiracy theories, to craft the narrative of, hey, look, there's people on the internet who talk about the things that you see on the news as being not exactly as they're presented by us, but look, this is what they're giving you as an alternative. It's all made up. It's not real in any way. These people aren't credible. They can't be trusted. And that's how the game is played. So it's always wise, if you are going to present information on this stuff, to sort of sit in the background a little bit at least and let the information come out before you jump onto some piece of it. Because that piece you jump on, you might later find out was completely fabricated disinformation that was designed on purpose to mislead people. And in that way, it will reduce your credibility if you are constantly latching onto those things and presenting them to other people. And indeed, in the beginning, this is how they get you to lose credibility with your friends and family. If you fall for this sort of thing and you are constantly talking about things that can be easily disproven, and your friends and your family look at you like, why are you lying to me? You don't have any idea what you're talking about. Oh, I see. You're one of those conspiracy theorists. So we don't want to fall into that trap, which is why I won't be discussing any of the finer points of the details that have been presented to us about what allegedly transpired. At least not right now. So anyways, going back to the actual golden arches themselves, let's dig a little deeper and see, hey, could there be some other symbolic meaning here? First, along those lines, I wanted to point out from the Wikipedia page of McDonald's Corporation that it just so happens the Golden Arches logo was first introduced in 1953 at a location in Phoenix, Arizona. So right away, we got alarm bells going off. Wait a second. This Golden Arch logo was introduced in Phoenix, Arizona the first time? That should be self-explanatory, but just in case there's somebody who isn't aware of the Phoenix symbolism, this goes all the way back to Egypt and probably even further than that, where it's this symbolism involving the mythical phoenix bird that represents some kind of rebirth from the ashes of the old thing that was sort of consumed in the fire, and that's kind of alchemical in nature in the way that it's usually presented. So you have this idea of creating something new surrounding symbolism involving the phoenix. So the first version of this logo here, these two golden arches coming together to make the M, was presented to us on a McDonald's in Phoenix, Arizona in 1953. The next logical place to look then would be into the history of arches and the kind of symbolism that they have associated with them. And you can't get very far in an inquiry like this without bumping into the triumphal arches, which, as it says here, are one of the most influential and distinctive types of ancient Roman architecture. Effectively invented by the Romans and using their skill in making arches and vaults, the Roman triumphal arch was used to commemorate victorious generals or significant public events such as the founding of new colonies, the construction of a road or bridge, the death of a member of the imperial family, or the accession of a new emperor. Archaeologists like to distinguish between a true triumphal arch built to celebrate an actual Roman triumph, a grand procession declared by the Roman Senate following military victory, a memorial arch, or a honorary arch essentially built by emperors to celebrate themselves, and arches typically in city walls that are merely grand gateways. But the groups are often conflated. Yeah, we won't concern ourselves with those details. We'll just note that these arches were built for a wide variety of different reasons in ancient Rome, and we can loosely associate one of those reasons with the arches that we see all around the world. Now, I mean, they have up here the famous one in Paris, but there are many other examples of this around the world, including one in New York City that we'll get to momentarily. But first, you then have to go to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, just for the reason that they associated the arch with a gateway. So not only do we have all of the reasons given to us as it related to ancient Rome, but now we have this overt association between arches and gateways. And when we go back to the McDonald's arches, then we have a new idea of triumphs representing some kind of conquest or new emperor, some new victory, a new configuration, but also gateways, a path from one place to another. And if you view it in terms of one arch and another arch, you could view it in terms of one gateway and another gateway, or a path from one dimension into a different dimension. Indeed, if you kind of abstract your view of this symbol here, you can see how this is one arch and somebody might come through here and then enter into this doorway, right? If you viewed it in that gateway sense. So you would have one gateway, another gateway, and if you viewed them like stargates, where somebody came through this way and then went in that way, and it's like an open doorway. So now we're starting to get somewhere with, oh, okay, I can see why this would be so closely associated with Donald Trump on purpose, because that's what he represents as the personification of September 11th, 2001. His first term is that first tower being struck by that plane, and then his second term will be that second plane that strikes the tower. And then those two towers collapse in a controlled demolition, and One World Trade Center rises from the ashes of Ground Zero, sort of like a phoenix. And via everything that they were able to achieve through that event, you could view it as going from one reality into another, which is why it is so closely associated with stargates. The 9/11 symbolism, that is. And if you view it like that, it's no accident then why, in the aftermath of Donald Trump's election to be the next president of the United States of America, you have this picture of all of the main characters in this play posing with the golden arch symbolism, because that's what this represents. And they're doing it on a plane, right? This is a picture taken on a plane, because they are the second plane flying into the metaphorical second tower, which will then culminate in the controlled demolition, metaphorically speaking, of America, however that looks. And go figure that it is associated with Rome, which is the empire that famously fell in history. And Elon Musk even had a recent tweet that I don't have up here that said, America is the new Rome. And then I think he elaborated like, but it won't collapse this time. Oh yeah, sure thing, buddy. That's what you're designed to do. We know. So yeah, no accident that they are eating this meal and take this picture and post it everywhere on a plane right after they are elected. In the context of what I just went into regarding the two arches and the gateways that it can represent. From one perspective. I'm not saying that's what they intended. This, again, is a hypothesis. It's just one possibility. But it does make logical sense. We can at least say that much. And adding on to the triumph arches idea and the gateway idea and 9/11, then we go to that arch in New York City, known as the Washington Square Arch, which, as you can see here, is located somewhere in, I think that's Greenwich Village. Oh, Manhattan. And if you just go back in time a little bit, you can see pictures of Washington Square Park Arch view of Twin Towers before 9/11, where they just so happen to position this arch, as I've gone into in prior videos, to be directly in line with the Twin Towers and sort of encapsulate them in this portal or Stargate, kind of showing you what it is. It's a gateway into something else. When they destroy these towers on purpose in the ritual that they have constructed around it, which includes Donald Trump, it will eventually result in traveling from one dimension into another, which again is why Donald Trump gave that speech in Traverse City, coming out to the Undertaker theme. It was a symbolic funeral ritual that they played out in that speech. which goes back to this idea as it relates to him as the personification of 9/11 in relationship to 9/11, and now also in relationship to these arches. Which is most likely why they have so closely associated him with McDonald's. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of this meme that someone brilliantly put out there where they changed certain parts of this famous picture of Donald Trump and put a McDonald's bag in his hand. But you see, that's where the power of subliminal subconscious programming comes from. Everyone has so clearly associated him with McDonald's that we laugh at something like this. Like, oh yeah, that's pretty funny. But there's a truth there that they have so closely associated these two things together that you instantly make the connection for meaning in this picture that otherwise has no meaning. He's holding up a bag of food. Why is that funny? Why is that important? Well, look at all of the pieces here. You have the bag of McDonald's food with the golden arches representing possibly the gateways from one place into another. And you have it right next to the American flag in this famous picture of his alleged assassination attempt. Now, the next place to go, because we are dealing with two arches here that are connected together, is the Golden Gate Bridge and how that programming is embedded in all kinds of different ways. And I'm not going to get into all of that now. I did a video on that not too long ago, at least part of it as it related to the Matthew Perry ritual and the film 17 again, which goes right back to the 17 minutes in between the two planes striking the towers and QAnon being the 17th letter of the alphabet. It's no accident that 17 again was the film that encoded this Matthew Perry part of the ritual that then tied into Batman, Christopher Nolan, and that whole thing that I spent all last year going into, so I won't do that now. This is more of a loose, abstract connection, but you can see how the golden arches here of the McDonald's logo is sort of replicated in the Golden Gate Bridge, where you have these two arches on the bridge. And then at night, especially in this light here, which is either in the morning or close to dusk, the orange/red paint of the bridge looks golden with the light that is lighting it up. But bigger than that, it's the obvious name of it, the Golden Gate Bridge, where you have these golden arches or the golden gates here. You have this clear association between the two, which is really getting at the same idea, right? The gateway or the bridge, it connects two things together, going from one place to another, which goes back to the Donald Trump ritual from its inception, the Moonchild, who was strategically coordinated to be the personification of 9/11 in tandem with the two so-called Great American Eclipses as the Moonchild that will eclipse the United States of America via his ritual. I mean, now that I'm looking at it and thinking about it, in terms of eclipses, you could view this as the two paths of the two eclipses in 2017 and 2024. Which is yet another reason why this symbol would be the perfect one to associate with Donald Trump. But again, going back to quote-unquote Ground Zero and the Trump World Tower in the United Nations Plaza, you can get a similar idea of what's going on here. You have the twin monoliths, right? You have the twin arches, the twin gateways, where from the ashes of Ground Zero, in this case, literal ashes of the Twin Towers, you have One World Trade Center rising in its place like a phoenix, like the place where we first saw these two golden arches on McDonald's in Phoenix, Arizona. And then you have Trump World Tower, that twin monolith overlooking the United Nations Plaza, where the one world will rise from the ashes of the collapse of the United States of America. Again, however that will look, that doesn't necessarily mean something extreme or destructive. That could mean something as esoteric as the collapse of our collective minds, something along those lines. And you look at the hedonistic lifestyles that everyone in America is living, and that probably isn't that far off from the truth, right? How detached we have become from who we were designed to be originally. And we all just think it's normal. Oh yeah, this is just how you live. But speaking of golden gates, I got to get to this part too, which is just wild stuff. I just typed Golden Gate metaphor symbolism into Google, and this was one of the results. Why was the Golden Gate sealed off? In relation to the Muslim belief Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, it is suggested that Suleiman, the Magnificent, sealed off the Golden Gate to prevent a false Messiah or Antichrist, quote unquote, coming through the entrance. And this is a picture of the Golden Gate, and as I will get to in the next link, you can see it's the two golden arches. It's the McDonald's logo. This is a clearer picture of it right here. You have one arch fused together with the second arch, and this is referred to as the Golden Gate in Jerusalem. Golden Gate on the east wall of the Temple Mount dates back to 1541 AD and is the oldest of the 8 gates of Jerusalem today. During the time of the First Temple, the Eastern Gate was the main entrance into the temple area. The rebuilt Eastern Gate of Jerusalem was the main entrance to the Second Temple area, and the same gate that Jesus entered on a humble donkey in his triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. There again, now you have the association between Jesus, their version of it anyway, and triumphal arches. This eastern gate of the Second Temple, which Jesus entered, may have had only one archway. The original gate of the Second Temple that Nehemiah built was maybe 1,000 feet south of where the Eastern Gate is today and is underground, as documented by archaeologist James Fleming in 1969. It was through the lower gate, now underground, that Jesus would have entered Jerusalem in 30 AD. I mean, assuming this is accurate, I have no idea if this is accurate or not. I'm not a biblical scholar. I don't know anything about this stuff. The destruction of the First Temple in 586 BCE included the destruction of the wall of Jerusalem and the burning down of the gates. The Second Temple. Cyrus II of Persia, or Cyrus the Great, reigned for 30 years. According to the Bible, when the Jewish exiles returned from Babylon to Jerusalem, following a decree from Cyrus the Great, construction of the Second Temple started at the original site of Solomon's Temple. It took 46 years to complete. I mean, I know enough about it that obviously the construction of the Third Temple is playing a big role in everything that's going on in terms of whatever all these people think is prophecy about what is meant to transpire. And they're all, doing what they think will bring that about, whether that's the Christians in America or the Jews in Jerusalem, or whatever the case is. Everybody's doing their part along these lines, thinking that it's ordained by God to do these things. In 444 BC, the king of Persia, who had a name that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, authorized a rebuilding project of the city of Jerusalem, including its wall and gates at the request of Nehemiah, whom he appointed as governor of Persian Judea. Nehemiah traveled to Jerusalem as governor and ruled with justice and righteousness for 12 years. Don't they always say that in the history books about how these people ruled? Nehemiah rebuilt the walls within 52 days. From the Sheep Gate in the north, the Hananiel Tower at the northwest corner, the Fish Gate in the west, the Furnaces Tower at the Temple Mount's southwest corner, the Dung Gate in the south, the East Gate, and the gate beneath the Golden Gate in the east. The Golden Gate is on the eastern side of the Temple Mount and the closest gate to the temple site. It is on the eastern wall of the Old City, facing the Mount of Olives and the Jewish cemetery. The Golden Gate is also called the Gate of Mercy and the Gate of Eternal Life. The gate has 2 doorways. The southern part is known as the Gate of Mercy and the northern part as the Gate of Repentance. Centuries ago, Jews prayed opposite this gate facing the temple. They began praying at the Gate of Repentance before proceeding to the Gate of Mercy to ask God for mercy. The Christians later called this gate the Golden Gate. The Arabs in the Middle Ages named it as the Gate of Eternal Life. They also called this gate the Mercy Gate. According to the Islamic Quran, the just will pass through this gate on the Day of Judgment. The East Gate was closed by the Muslims in 810 AD, reopened in 1102 AD by the Crusaders, and then it was walled up by Saladin, the first Sultan of Egypt, after regaining Jerusalem in 1137 AD. The Muslim conquerors, the Ottoman Turks, added great stones to the Golden Gate in 1530 AD, and a cemetery was planted in front of it, thinking that the Jewish Messiah would not set foot in a cemetery. Many believe this was done to prevent the entrance of the Jewish Messiah through that gate, as was foretold by known Old Testament prophecies. However, Ezekiel prophesies the shutting of this gate itself around 600 BCE, that it would be shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered it in by it, therefore it shall be shut. In 1535 AD, Suleiman the Magnificent, longest reigning sultan of the Ottoman Empire, ordered the ruined walls of the city of Jerusalem to be rebuilt, including the East Gate. In 1541 AD, in the process of rebuilding, Suleiman had the new gate walled up, and it has stayed that way until today. It is interesting that this gate is the only one of the 8 gates in Jerusalem that is sealed. The Arabs believe that since the Jews expect the Messiah to come through this gate, they tried to prevent any possibility of his return. And there again is a picture of it where you have the 2 golden arches of the golden gates. So let's go back to the golden arches now that have been associated with Donald Trump so closely. Symbolically speaking, do we potentially have an answer here for why McDonald's is all over the news, and especially very closely related to this next leg of the ritual that involves Donald Trump? The Golden Gate, the gateway, is going to be opened via Donald Trump. His presidency, whatever they choose to do through it, if they even let him be president, right? I mean, they could assassinate him and then provoke a response to that would lead to the literal destruction of the United States of America, where people would go to war with each other if that happened, or, you know, they would present it to us in that way, in the same way they presented what happened in the United States Capitol on January 6th. I mean, they could do something like that. Or they have it be more broadly through his actual presidency, where he supports the expansion of Greater Israel that eventually leads to the either literal or metaphorical opening of this Golden Gate in Jerusalem, as it relates to the construction of the Third Temple and that whole thing. Maybe that's why these 2 golden arches are so closely associated with Donald Trump, and now Luigi Mangione. In other words, this gate is physically sealed, but if you look at the symbolism of everything that's involved here, we can see the idea that metaphorically, esoterically, they are opening this gate in another way through the symbolism here that is embedded into real world events that will manipulate people all over the world into allowing this to transpire in the actual world, for this gate to be opened, as it were. That's what all of the symbolism is designed to do, at least in this perspective of it, which then is why you would have Luigi all over the news with the golden gates and the king associated with it, put into everyone's mind's eye who is paying attention to this story, because this is the idea that their king, their Messiah, will return through this gate. And that's why Donald Trump is so closely associated with it, given what he is doing to America through his ritual, and how that ritual will, if they get their way, result in this transpiring here. Hopefully that makes sense. Finally, real quick, I just want to summarize everything that I've gone into so far via the image that I have on the screen here, where you have the golden arches symbolically representing a gateway from one reality into another, which is why it is so closely associated with Donald Trump, because he represents the gateway from one reality into another, the quantum leap, Operation Warp Speed, the Great American Eclipse. Well, hopefully you have a better idea of what I mean there by comparing it to this image of 2 arches that are sort of set up in a similar way, where you can really understand the idea of the gateway from one reality over here with the Twin Towers into a new reality with the One World Trade Center. This is the doorway into this, which you can see kind of represented here if you imagine going from the Twin Towers into the One World Trade Center reality. And it's kind of difficult the way I set this image up because we're used to reading from left to right in the United States of America and the quote-unquote Western world in general. And so the thing that happens before should be on the left as opposed to on the right here. But hopefully that's challenging your brain to see this out of order, because that's how you have to view these things, because it's not linear. So Donald Trump, as the personification of this event that resulted in this, has a similar symbol associated with him because that's what he's doing, just on a different scale. This all transpired in one city, and yes, it had effects all over the world in various ways and furthered the agenda in various ways, but then Donald Trump is doing the same thing, taking us even deeper from this reality into something else, and his presidency achieved that both through the COVID-19 pandemic and then through everything else that it will achieve via the controlled demolition that will result from his 2 presidential terms that represent the 2 planes that flew into these 2 towers and then destroyed them in a controlled demolition. That's what Donald Trump is. That's why he's so closely associated with McDonald's and the Golden Arches, taking us from one reality into another. And hopefully this view of it really makes that make a little more sense. I mean, you could very literally view this as walking into a portal or a Stargate where you come from this reality and go into that reality. And that's why they put all of that kind of symbolism around it, I think, that science fiction Stargate type of symbolism. All the quantum leap stuff, it really evokes that when you kind of think of it along those lines. So like I said at the beginning, this is all just speculation. I'm not saying this is what it is. Okay, this is just one possibility here. Ultimately, I don't know what they really intend with all of this stuff. They're 1,000 levels above me in terms of their understanding of what's going on here. So this is just guesswork. That's all it is. So I hope you take it as such. Don't imply in your mind that I have somehow figured this out and know exactly what it is. Okay? So disclaimer aside, that's it for now.